have my first brand new car, and I'm handling my car payments, and I paid off the balance of one of my credit cards just the other month, and so I am doing well.
5/8 to 13. 5 down, 5
Heck, I'm making a lot of money on the stock market through mutual funds, and so I am much more likely to go on vacation, to take the family on a plane someplace than I was a year ago or 5 years ago.
Well, the U.S. economy now is about as good as it gets.
Stocks keep splitting, companies keep growing, unemployment's down. So unless there's some smoke and screen and mirrors going on, I would think that everything's okay.
We're seeing a whole new genre of people coming in that before thought they couldn't afford it, and now they can. They want extreme luxury.
We can't seem to build enough massage rooms to satisfy the demand that people have to come and get this service.
I worked much harder 10 years ago to get a lot less, and now I feel that spoiled almost and fortunate, and I hope it doesn't end.
You almost feel bad telling your mom, you know, oh, I'm going for a massage and spend money on that.
They want the extra wood package. They want the premium leather system with the 2-position memory. They want the filtration system that filters out carbon monoxide.
It's very popular to have the full 2-story family room with the bridge overlooking the second floor.
They want the 6-disc CD player that comes out of the dash and that is fully programmed from the dash. They want the HomeLink system that you just program your garage door openers to. This does their sunglasses up here.
10 years ago, I probably would not have spent as much on a cup of coffee.
They expect a higher end product, and they're going to get a higher end product because that's what we deliver.
I guess 10 years ago I was looking for free happy hours.
They want the vehicle completely loaded, and they will wait for it to have it exactly as they want it.
I think that the prosperity we're enjoying now is to a large extent because we won the war. We won the Cold War.
It's another planet almost, because I don't see it happening.
Markets are good at efficiency, they're not good at fairness.
Most people are mortgaged to the hilt, you know, and they're living paycheck to paycheck. They're taking one credit card to pay another credit card off.
Yeah, I really think this is the Achilles heel of the economy.
On the face of it, it seems as though we should be able to continue to have great prosperity for the next 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years.
I'm not going to change my lifestyle unless the stock market crashes.
Research. Country club times, country club setting.
Man, it doesn't get much better than this.
Did you bring your expense forms, Andy?
Market's up, unemployment's down, job creation never been better.
There are a lot of jobs, but how long are we going to hang on to them, do you know?
As long as we keep working hard, like this.
Well, sure, but what happens if it all goes south? The stock market is clobbered, Asian crisis goes crazy. Sorry.
Home ownership's up. Don't know how much more you can ask for.
Remember all those layoffs we had back in the early 90s?
Layoffs? No one's getting laid off these days. They're getting downsized. They're being freed up to pursue careers as more productive, independent consultants.
Well, it's just a worker sacrifice for efficiency.
Efficiency. That's the name of the game, is efficiency. You got to.
Are you going to hit it?
Yeah, right now. Ugh. It's people like you that keep spreading doubt and gloom. Just let it go. Enjoy it, man. Let me hit this ball.
Somebody's got to be a realist.
These are real times, and things are real good.
Well, I hope they're better than that shot. Yeah, it's easy to feel rich now, but it's easy to forget what things were like in the early 90s.
No pain, no gain, man. That was the pain, and this is the gain.
Well, that's fine, but every time I go up on Market Street at 20th Street, I see the vacant lot where the building was supposed to go up in the 80s. You know, everybody felt rich in the 80s too, and look what the excess did to us.
Well, there was excess. There's no question about that. And excesses have a way of shaking themselves out.
Well, that's what worries me. I don't know how solid this whole thing is.
I think the manufacturing base in the United States is probably stronger today than it ever has been. There is an alloy right now that we invented for the landing gear on an F-18 because they were having stress corrosion cracking problems with it. That's finding its way into golf clubs and tennis rackets and softball bats and mountain climbing picks and so on. Steel? But this is not that. This is a materials company, and the applications that these alloys seek are really intense. I mean, if we didn't make this metal, that guy wouldn't have that hip. If we didn't make that metal, that jet engine wouldn't be turning. If we didn't make that metal, that airbag wouldn't work. We're much better able to compete today than we were 10 or 15 years ago when some of these foreign countries were really slapping us aside the head with new efficiencies that they had been able to put in place. So I'm bullish on the long-term viability of America here.
There's a lot of energy right now, and economies have a way, especially free market economies, have a way of taking that energy and going as far as they can with it. People overshoot, people make mistakes.
Oh yeah, no, I know. That's my concern, is what happens after the next few months or the next year or 2 years. You know, at some point it comes crashing down. Everybody says, why didn't people tell us that back in the late 90s?
But somebody should tell them the time to make hay is now. It does rain from time to time. So people get wet. Smart people get an umbrella. You know, you can worry till you're blue in the face, but the last time things were this good, LBJ had just won his landslide. People were watching Dick Van Dyke on television, and the Beatles were just about to cross the Atlantic. Very nice.
Was a time where the country kind of settled down after going through a terrible depression and a war, and I thought it got a lot of stability then, which was good for the time.
Okay, granted, things are a lot like they were in the 50s right now. Inflation is 3%, unemployment is low, and I'm not hitting very well.
You can get a mortgage for 6% now. Haven't been able to do that since the 50s.
Nice one.
Beautiful.
In the 1960s, we tried to finance a war in Vietnam, and at the same time, we were trying to support the growth of a social welfare state, a great society. And that was very expensive to try to do both. And rather than raise taxes to pay for that, because politically that would have been very unpopular, instead, we wound up running larger and larger federal deficits. We also cranked up the money supply to support those kind of spendings. And we wound up having a situation where there was too much money and too much demand for resources, chasing too little of a supply of those kind of resources.
Why didn't you rent a cart?
I was nostalgic for the 70s. I thought we'd relive the decade. Gas prices went through the ceiling, couldn't afford to drive. I got rid of my GTO and got a Rabbit.
Well, you know, that says it all. That's the difference between then and now. Inflation back then ran close to 11% around 1974. Now, it's barely around 2%, less. Makes all the difference in the world.
But we're way down the value chain now, remember. The only thing before us is nickel, chrome, moly, cobalt. You know, we're right out of the mine. So we're right down at the end of the value chain. High inflation usually means those raw material costs are starting to escalate. We try to turn around as best we can and pass that along, and it keeps rolling through the system until a car costs more. And then somebody in the government adds all that activity up and says, gee, we got 6% inflation going on here. And during those times, people also want to make more. So you've got 3 and 4 and 5, and back in those days, a wage inflation that was significantly higher than that.
I remember in the early 70s when I was covering stories about labor negotiations, and people thought they were doing terrible if they didn't get a 10% raise.
Ronald Reagan stood up to flight controllers, and that set a precedent for much more moderate wage increases, more consistent with productivity. So the 1980s did see a lot of events that started to break the back of inflation, absolutely. I think if you look in our history, you'll find that price increases, inflation, occurred only during war times. The end of the Cold War was the end of a 50-year war. It was the end of a combination of World War II and the Cold War together. And because in a wartime environment, you obviously can't trade and compete with your enemies, and it's actually very hard to do this, even that with your friends, we find that the lack of competition tends to be very inflationary. Wars tend to be periods where prices go up a great deal. That's what history shows. So you can go back to the War of 1812, you can go up to the Civil War, World War I, World War II, combined with the Cold War. And all those events, we saw prices going up dramatically. When peace broke out, prices tended to actually decline. We tended to have deflation, falling prices. So if you view it from that perspective, then the Cold War was just part of a 50-year war in which prices went up by 500%.
We spent over $5 trillion on nuclear weapons during the Cold War, and all of that is sitting in silos and sitting on submarines and not doing anything. Imagine if we'd spent that money on factories and cargo ships and locomotives and things that really produce something of value.
We have low inflation today, and that's one of the reasons why the economy in the United States is so strong. So we don't have the issue of these raw materials escalating in price. If anything, they're dropping off in price from what one would normally expect them to be. But we've still got a workforce that says, I'd like to have a pay increase every year. You've still got 2 to 3% inflation cooking through here, and I think most industries are raising pay rates 3 and 4% a year. So you've got that push coming. We can't raise prices today. We have to take costs out. And thankfully, we've got the capital to invest in new manufacturing mentalities, new systems, new ways to arrange machines, cellular manufacturing, team-based activity, new pieces of equipment that are much more productive than they were before, so that you can offset this pressure from the bottom with a reduction in the cost of what you make, and you can interface with a customer base without having to try to pass any of this cost escalation on. It's a pressure cooker, but much better to deal with at 2 and 3% than it would be at 7 to 8.
If there's a single thing you can point to show why things are so much better now, it's inflation. You get a raise today, it's real money. Not bad for a guy who hasn't played since the Johnson administration.
Only play when interest rates fall below 7%. That's another reason the economy is doing so well.
Low interest rates combined with those 95% loan to value mortgage loans allowed me to get into a house, I'd say a year ahead of where if I had needed to scrape together for a 10% or 15% down payment.
Say, didn't you write a column recently showing us how to calculate the value of a home addition like a kitchen or bathroom? I was thinking of adding an 18-hole golf course to my house.
With interest rates down this low, I'm going to do it the easy way, buy a big house on a golf course development.
The interest rates today allow people to own homes substantially more valuable than they could have owned in the 1980s because their monthly payment is so much lower than it would have been. There is an incredible amount of money being made in the 1990s. There is a philosophy of our buyers to spend a lot of money on their homes, and it has really helped stimulate sales for us in the $400,000 to $600,000 or $700,000 price range. They want every amenity you can put in a home: the granite countertops, the marble floors, the alarm systems, the beautiful decks, the extra rooms, the computer setup systems in their studies, the lavish master baths. It goes on and on. We average at a community like this over $100,000 in options to our base housing prices. And the people see that they can't get enough. After they move in, they continue to spend more money. After we've sold them the homes, on decks and patios and landscaping, and add their own rooms on, and pools and tennis courts. it's amazing how much money people are putting into their homes.
This one I want to make the ball go way up and curve right over there. I want to make it look just the way interest rates have behaved over the last 20 years. It started low, shot up into the mid-teens, and then they came back down again.
For consumers, it's been a tremendous plus. I mean, you can now get a fixed rate mortgage for 7%. As recently as 5 years ago, the average mortgage rate was closer to 10. That's a big difference. Moreover, the decline in rates has been a tremendous boost to businesses, not only because they've been able to borrow more cheaply and finance their own expansion, but their interest payments have declined substantively. And one of the principal reasons why profitability at U.S. businesses has risen so extraordinarily in this expansion is that their interest payments have fallen.
Good morning, Carpenter Technology. This is Laura. May I help you?
And I think there probably were some decisions that were deferred during those days when interest rates were so ridiculously high. And that probably in some cases caused some companies to miss an appropriate expansion and delay it and put them under some unneeded pressure later on.
Dollar for dollar, the decline in interest payments has gone right to higher profitability. Higher profits make businesses more aggressive. They go out and they hire and expand and invest. And that's one of the reasons why the economy has done so well. So the decline in interest rates has been a tremendous boost to the entire economy and has contributed significantly to the economy's performance.
Keeping our fingers crossed, we hope it continues. We think the demographics are in place. As our buyers grow older, they have more money. We think the economy is very stable and very strong, and we're very confident that for the next few years this will continue.
Interest rates for things like mortgages are the lowest they've been in 3 decades, but there are a lot of interest rates that are not at their lowest level, and things like credit card rates. That kind of borrowing is hurting the people who can least afford it.
They don't have stocks that they can use to pay down the debt. They don't own homes in many cases. They can't use the appreciating value of their house to help pay down their other higher cost consumer installment debt or credit cards or other types of debt. In order to make the purchases that many folks at the top half of the income distribution take for granted, will have to borrow. They'll go into a department store, ask the department store that if they buy this product, if they buy the TV or the refrigerator, will the department store finance that? And in many cases, the answer will be yes. They'll get a loan to make that purchase.
I wonder if there's such a thing as golf bankruptcy.
Well, you can join the 1.4 million other people who are declaring bankruptcy this year. That's a record.
Whereas years ago we would have seen $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 in debt. Today we see people coming in many times who owe substantially more than a year salary or double or triple a year's salary in credit card debts. I believe the banks have brought this about through the ease of the credit card debt. If you've been pre-approved, and pre-approved. And when you dangle that in front of somebody who may not have everything he so desires, he's going to take the credit card. Banks complain, everyone's taking advantage of the system, it's not fair. The banks certainly are not losing money on credit cards. And that's the reason for the ease of the credit. They're making very substantial dollar amounts in spite of the losses that are brought about. So to the people who say ease of credit, these people are taking advantage. It's the banks who allowed this to happen, but also the banks who've reaped the benefits.
Over the past 5 years, we'll have seen over 5 million households file for bankruptcy. And then, just to put that into context for you, there are roughly 100 million households in the United States. So 5% of all U.S. households have filed for bankruptcy in the last 5 years. And this is at a time when the unemployment rate has never been lower and when the economy has never been as good. So can you imagine what will happen when the economy falters, when unemployment actually rises and interest rates actually rise? We will see a much more significant problem. It is indeed the economy's Achilles heel.
Well, I congratulate you on your increased efficiency. More strokes in less time.
When I first started practicing, each lawyer had a secretary. Now, some of the things that are happening is, number one, lawyers are doing their own typing on word processing. So it's cut down the need for the number of secretaries you have. So now you can have sometimes two lawyers to a secretary.
You're sure 3-wood's the right tool for the job?
I thought I'd experience for myself what American industry went through 25 years ago, when corporate managers consistently used the wrong tools.
Scale was an important thing. That is, trying to become bigger was a big issue. Trying to get as big an organization as you could. There was a sense it was more efficient. But there was also a sense at the top of the organization was that that's how you became a more successful leader, was not necessarily having a more profitable company, but having a bigger company. And you could get a bigger company by acquiring companies.
I'm going to make him an offer he can't refuse.
For example, Francis Ford Coppola, when he made The Godfather, was working for Paramount, which was owned by Gulf and Western, which was a mining company.
There was no leverage between the business units that made 2 and 2 equal 5. At best, it equaled 4, and often 3 and 2. So it would be like Carpenter buying an insurance company. We don't know anything about it. There's no fixed cost leverage. There's no distribution. There's no customer base that's common. There's nothing in common. But they grew that way to get bigger. But they need stronger.
You know, by the end of the 1970s, you saw a lot of companies that were fat and not very efficient. Foreign competition came along and basically illustrated this problem.
You asked for it, you got it, Toyota.
In a few industries, literally pierced the bubble, I think in the auto industry being one of them. And then the companies are in this dilemma about what to do about it. I think in the 1970s, it's probably fair to say they didn't do very much. They complained a lot, and you saw a series of complaints, complaining first about unfair, low-cost foreign competition. And then it became clear, I think, over time that, in fact, the Japanese, in particular, competition was not really low cost because of low wage. It was low cost simply because they were more efficient.
Where we used to compete on the basis of our ability to mass produce standardized goods at the lowest prices, now we compete on a much more complex set of standards. We have to provide quality, variety, customization, convenience, and do all that at the lowest possible prices. That forces you to use flexible technology. If you want variety, you can do it with a few keystrokes now, whether it's making a suit or making a new production run.
The caster itself is an efficient operation to begin with, but now that they've computerized and have a lot less waste, it's much more efficient than it ever has been. When I first started working here, I just figured that the melt shop would stay status quo for as long as I was going to be here, and I wasn't going to have to change at all. But it happened that way, and you've got to go with modern technology. I mean, everybody else is, and that's the only way you stay up with competition.
It's written down.
Yeah, they have 0.5.
Out in the manufacturing environment, it has allowed us to put control mechanisms on these machines that are much more quick to make adjustments to variation than the human mind or the human hands would be. So they actually manage the variation in those hammers to a closer tolerances than the man could ever. We don't react that quickly. We've got computer controls on the rotary forges that you saw. In the VAR furnaces, we have a laser gauge going across the bottom of that activity, and it's actually counting the drops of metal coming off the bottom of that electrode, because the closer it gets to the molten bath, the drops will come faster, and the further away it goes, the fewer they are. Where you want it to be is where we control it with a computer. Counting those drops and managing the gap between the electrode and the molten bath. Never could do that before. And what that's allowed us to do now is to provide a product to the aircraft aerospace industry or to the orthopedic implant industry that's got a quality level to it in grain structure, physical strength, corrosion resistance, and so on that never been able to have before. The customers ask us to respond in time frames that are much faster than they have been in the past. So if we're now making something and it takes us 6 months to make it and the customer needs it in 3, then we probably have to carry 3 months worth of inventory somewhere, and it sucks up cash. Better that we should figure out a way to make it in 3 months. And so that's what's going on today. And the computer has a big play here in helping us look at ways to control these processes and schedule this plant because nobody wants to tie up cash in inventory. Rightfully so. I'd rather have it in a new machine. Just in time. I want it when I want it, not a moment sooner, not a moment later, and I want it ready and suitable for what I'm going to use it for.
Oh, I don't know. What do the rules say about moving a ball with a bad lie?
Something about a club length and a stroke, but let's invoke the spirit of deregulation. Pick it up and throw it on the fairway.
All right, 90s style. Do whatever I want.
From a great many years, it was quite ordinary for a government bureaucrat, in essence, to set the price of an airline ticket. For a government bureaucrat to decide how much a trucking company could charge to move goods across the country. And this was a very planned economy in these areas. And it was planned because we typically gave private companies monopolies in particular areas, geographic areas, sometimes lines of business. And over the years, it's been quite obvious that those monopolies and government price regulations have produced goods and services that are inferior and more expensive. The movement from monopoly to competition and ending price regulation is really just an example of common sense.
Competing, having competitors is not necessarily a lot of fun. It's hard work. There's always a challenge to be at least as good, if not better, than your competitor. It really brings out the best in all of us. And also it forces us to constantly innovate, to constantly figure out how can we come to the marketplace with something better than our competitors have. And it's that pressure to succeed and to excel and to beat the competition that really benefits the most important economic player, and that's the consumer.
As the businesses that have had the monopoly restructure themselves, they've reduced employment in that business. At the same time, in the wider economy, the lower prices and better services is contributing to much greater economic activity and greater employment.
So you've got technological innovation, broader competition, low inflation, cheaper money, smarter management. It all makes for a more profitable, more prosperous America.
Yeah, unless you're an American worker. I mean, what's it do for them?
Depends on what you're doing and who you're doing it for.
It's hard for me to say. Things have gone up, and basically the pay stays the same. If you do get a raise somewhere along the line, it just goes out the door for something else.
Where I work right now, they have, it's not they don't use the words downsizing it. Now it's force reductions and such, you know. It's still there. The uncertainty about your job is still there for the regular working class guy.
You know, with everything we hear about the service economy, I'm surprised there's not somebody standing here to do this for me.
There are two myths about the American economy at the moment that don't serve us well. Neither is really true. In fact, this is not Bill Gates' economy or Ronald McDonald's economy. It's more Drew Carey's economy or Dilbert's economy. Most of the jobs are in office work, and those are the service jobs that count.
Well, actually, I mean, I was being facetious because I don't think these service jobs are such a bad thing. I had a job in a factory one time, and it was dirty and deafening and dangerous and dehumanizing, and I think that a lot of people are better off with the service economy.
52 million jobs out of 132 million jobs nowadays are in office settings for managers, marketing people, sales people, financial people. These are the people who are re-engineering all the rest of us.
Thank you for calling the Vanguard Group.
This is Susan Otto. How may I help you?
We've become part of
Yes,
the
hello. How are you today?
phenomenon we would all refer to, I think, as the growth of the service economy.
And I understand you have some questions about the Windsor 2.
From Vanguard's point of view in particular, just to provide some perspective, back in 1990, not so long ago, we had fewer than 2,000 people in the entire company. Today, over 7,000 people.
Thank you for calling the Vanguard Group.
This is Keenan Okocheney speaking. How can I help you?
Over 1,000 of the 7,500 roughly crew members that we have are dealing directly with clients on the telephone day in and day out. We take upwards of 50,000 phone calls a day from clients all over the country and to some extent even all over the world. So we need people that are skilled in dealing with the investing public, how to relate to them, how to relate information that at times can be very difficult to understand for the layman.
The Windsor 2 is also an all-stock fund.
Balanced fund, and that's going to diversify between stocks and bonds. Did you want to?
So client service people, big group, information processing would be another big group, and computer skills of all kinds would be a third major skill.
These days, it may take 1 or 2 factory workers to produce a product, and a dozen marketing people, accountants, and other back office types. The old days, it was just the opposite.
We're doing the same basic jobs now with a lot less people because basically the computer does a lot of what some of the individuals used to do.
The job eater in the American economy is not immigrants. It is not foreign trade. The job eater in the American economy is technology. And what's happened in manufacturing has been that we've learned to combine technology, flexible technology, with flexible work systems, both in a particular workplace and in these new, complicated, even global networks of suppliers and producers and independent workers to produce much higher volumes with many fewer people. It's the same thing that happened in agriculture. Early in this century, more than half of us were on the farm. Now it takes about 3% of us or less to bring all the food we need to the table.
The transition is painful, there's no question about it. But at the other end of that process is a much more productive, much more efficient economy.
The problem, I think, is that it's easy to sort of sit up on the mountaintop and look down over the economy and say, well, that's an efficiently operating economy, but it's much different when you're down in the valley and you're the guy who just lost his factory job and there's nothing else nearby and you've got a house payment to make and kids who need braces and all of those kinds of very trite things. And that's the question I think that looms over us is, how much change can we endure and how fast? And do we want to live in the kind of society where everybody is uncertain all of the time? You know, right now we're all feeling very happy. It was only 5 years ago when we were all pretty miserable and worried about losing our jobs. Do we want to go through that cycle every 5 years or every 18 months or live with it constantly?
We left the Europeans and the Japanese behind in the last turn in the global economic race because they were inflexible. But flexibility in America is oftentimes a fancy word for fired.
When I first saw Breyer's ice cream and I saw the green leaf with the red lettering, I didn't think of ice cream. To me, it was a symbol, it wasn't a sign. That symbol signified security. I started in October of 1975. I started as a tank washer. And at that time, the wages were comparable to industry's wages in all industry. It was a good living. It was a middle-class living. And I thought if I stay here and I apply myself, I can move up into a better paying job, which I did. And I thought, to me, this is what the American dream is all about. This is success. Never any aspirations of being rich. All I wanted was to have what I guess everyone will call the American dream. It's a home of my own to raise my children and provide them with the necessities of life and a few luxuries. The dream lasted for 20 years. In 1995, at that time, an international outfit, Unilever, owned Breyer's ice cream. I had a meeting in August 1995. It was dubbed a 6-minute meeting. And that's how long it lasted, 6 minutes. And we were told that operations would cease the Philadelphia plant because they had to compete with the market. And they thought it would be more efficient if they moved all our operations to a more modern plant in Framingham, Massachusetts. There was 2 representatives from Unilever there who never said a word. Our plant manager did the talking. and I could see the embarrassment and hurt on his face when he had to tell us that. I found myself 58 years old, and I was going to be out in the job market looking for a job. The only thing I knew was the dairy business, and for half of my working years I worked for Breyers, and there's no companies around this area that's equivalent to Breyers ice cream today. So I just took the first thing I got, and that was working at the casino, Atlantic City, for approximately half of what I made at Breyers. And $8 an hour doesn't go very far today, and I thought the only thing I could do is keep looking at the papers, keep submitting resumes and applications. I saw an ad in the paper for an outfit called DAP. And after several interviews, he told me, "We're ready for you. Come in, start." I consider myself fortunate. I'm very lucky to get a job at my age, 60 years old. A job that could very easily have hired a 25-year-old and figured they can get more out of him. I like to think my employer is happy with my work. I hope he is. And I'm appreciative to be where I am today. If I could talk to them face to face, not only Unilever, but all these companies that are on this downsizing kick. You're pillaging and destroying the wealth of this nation. If you want to be a captain in the industry, you're responsible for the people in the boat. I can still get the chills when I hear Pete Smith sing "God Bless America." And I still believe in this country. But I don't believe in the people that are running these corporations. Not a day has gone by that I haven't thought about it. Miss the job, miss the people I worked with. I miss feeling satisfaction, knowing I did a good job. But maybe if it's had to happen, it's probably was the best time of my life to happen. I don't need that much to keep us. My wife never demanded anything, never. She was willing to wait. You know, we always had plans. The kids were adults when the house was paid. There's a lot of things we're going to do. We're not going to do them now. We never are. The last day of production at the Breyers plant was October 27th, and my 20th anniversary was October 29th. Well, I exceeded my 20th anniversary. I stayed a few weeks after they closed. After they ceased operations, stayed a few weeks to help clean up the plant and pack things away. But they awarded you gifts for different anniversaries, and my 20th anniversary is that clock. The plant wasn't there for them to award it to me. They had to mail it to me. I try and keep it running all the time. Try and never let it run down. Keeps good time, too. It's a nice clock. And when I look at it, it brings back a lot of good memories.
Fears of industrial workers in the 1970s, when American productivity failed and we started losing manufacturing jobs, have been fully realized. Most American industrial towns have turned into rusting museums. There's good reason to be anxious in this economy. We are all becoming service workers, largely in offices or in schools or in hospitals. We don't have a flexible toolkit of pensions, health care, education and training development, family services, and certainly income guarantees. And so if we lose our jobs, there's a lot at stake. Most middle-class Americans are unlikely to become poor if they lose their jobs, because they're two earners in families. But the real issue in politics and economics is not whether you become poor, but how far you have to fall. And that's the fear in the American system.
Well, the key is not to bottle up change. The key is to have change happen continuously. That way it can be absorbed, it can be filtered through the economy, people can get used to it, families can adjust, and not have things frozen in time for a long period, because inevitably at the end of that you have a much more wrenching change.
Yeah, I wonder whether a lot of the beneficiaries of this current prosperity are people who were pretty well equipped to handle change. And the people who are left behind are obviously the people who weren't very well equipped to handle change. It's very easy for us all just to feel happy and wealthy when we're in the middle class and to sort of forget that there were people who weren't in a position to exploit all of these opportunities and that they're still with us.
It's always the case with markets. Markets are good at efficiency, they're not good at fairness. And what we're seeing with the rise of this market is, rise of market influences, is greater efficiency and greater inequality. And it's not necessarily fair. You know, people who already have opportunities and people who have assets are going to do much better, and those who don't and can't move easily and are not, don't have the skills that make them mobile are going to do worse than they did before. And it's going to, in that sense, generate a lot of inequality. It's a very interesting question whether this is good or bad for the economy as a whole. Clearly it comes down to good for whom. It's great for some people, it's terrible for others.
Clearly, since 1980 and the whole Reagan ethic has taken over, that the gap between rich and poor in this country has widened substantially.
Well, you're right. There are a lot more rich people, and the rich are definitely richer. But this is a very widespread period of prosperity. We've got 401ks, we've got people in mutual funds, we've got people enjoying gains in their salaries.
The prospectus will also come with a brochure that's called How to Select a Bond Fund.
The phenomenal thing about this market is the participation level. Statistically, about 40% of all households have some involvement in the stock market, and that is significantly higher than it's ever been before.
It's made for a much better environment for the fellows to try to save some money with a 401k, because it's money that they basically don't see, and they designate to go into their long-term savings. There's about 7 options there to put your money into, and most of them are doing real well. The company here also has a profit-sharing plan, and that's been very successful. Everybody's involved in it, so of course everybody's interested in how the company's doing to perform. It used to be a bonus setup where you got paid for some of the work that you put out, but it got out of hand a little bit, and they went to profit-sharing, and that's worked out real well.
The compensation systems were fundamentally volume-driven. The more you make, the more you make. That was totally unsuitable, because you make a lot of what you don't need, and you make it faster than you needed it. And the stuff you needed to make is the stuff that's on the pile. I mean, it didn't hook up to doing the job as well as you could do from the customer viewpoint. And inventory resulted in inefficiencies and so on. Instead of paying you for making mountains of stuff we don't need, let's pay the employees based on how much money the enterprise makes, because now we're talking about all being on the same page.
Well, before, I don't think anybody ever looked at the bottom line, because on a week-to-week basis it really wasn't affecting them as long as they were getting paid their bonus. With profit sharing, it matters quite significantly, because if the bottom line is not positive, you're not going to get any profit sharing.
So that fluctuation up and down, that 11%, is just basically tracking 30 stocks.
It's never been easier for an American to invest in the stock market. It's a phone call away. Increasingly, investing in the market is a keyboard away through the internet, and the options for investing are greater than they've ever been before. And the information sources are greater.
The fact is that this is benefiting more people than any period in recent history.
Well, sure, and I think all the statistics say that, but I think we have to remember that a lot of people being richer is not everybody being richer, and there's still a lot of people who aren't a part of all of this, and the question is, where are they going to be in the future? I think that there's a kind of a hard-heartedness afoot in the land that says that if you haven't found a good-paying job in this economy, you're just not going to find one, or you're not trying. And I think there are a lot of people who simply don't have the tools to flourish in this kind of economy, and we're not doing anything to see that they do in the future.
Well, I don't know what to tell you. You've left me speechless.
Well, that's the whole idea.
Well, you know, this is, to me, the dark side of this as good as it gets economy, that this income distribution is what I'll call being skewed, that the folks that are doing well are doing even better, the folks that are doing badly are doing even worse. And this gulf is increasing, and it's a problem. It's a problem for the economy as a whole. When the economy does falter and unemployment does rise and interest rates begin to rise again, it's the folks at the bottom half of the distribution that are going to suffer. They're going to curtail their spending, and the entire economy is going to suffer, even the folks at the top half.
It's never going to be easy to make it in America. Getting into the economic mainstream is not automatic. The key is energy, discipline, enterprise, and education. If you have those, as long as there's opportunities, you'll find them.
Well, sure, but I mean, we have to think a little bit about the people whose parents don't send them to the Ivy League. And we still live in a country where many of the school systems don't have enough textbooks to go around, and not to mention computers. And if you're saying, well, you know, you're on your own, I mean, at what point should you be on your own? When you enter kindergarten, or when you get out of high school or get out of college?
You are much more an individual free agent, as it were, in the labor market than you were before. People are much more responsible for their own careers. They have to figure out career advice themselves. They have to figure out how to get their skills. They have to do their own career planning. They have to manage their own investments more. Pension funds have given way to various kinds of individual accounts, 401ks, 403b accounts, which are self-managed. Right? So individuals are much more responsible, take greater risks, much more accountable for their own outcomes.
You know, right now, a good economic theory would say, we have prosperity, we have a lot of money, maybe we should spend some of it on dealing with these problems that are going to haunt us down the road with an ill-equipped workforce. But instead, we're chasing the holy grail of low taxes, and nobody's going to spend money on those things. And the question is, what's going to happen in 15 or 20 years when we do have a large underclass that has not been equipped to exploit these opportunities?
One of the perhaps best attributes of the U.S. economy is that the income distribution has been relatively narrow, that the folks at the bottom always felt that they could make it to the top, and it was always attainable and reachable, and now that's increasingly less so. And the folks at the bottom end of the distribution, when they realize, or they come to the realization that it's almost completely out of their reach, that's when you may see more significant problems that go beyond economics to social and political problems.
You're assuming that the underclass is growing. Actually, there's just as good reason to think that there's more mobility up and down than there ever was. People are moving up, people who are kind of getting their act together and taking advantage of the opportunities that are there. Should we spend money on education? Absolutely. Should we spend money on training people? Absolutely. But you can't take such a paternalistic attitude that you attempt to hold back the overall dynamism of the economy for the sake of those who are the farthest behind. That just shrinks the pie for everyone and makes it that much harder ultimately to help the people you want to help.
Well, I mean, I can preach all day, I guess, but the fact is that we do live in a you're-on-your-own kind of society. You're going to have to take care of your own retirement. You're going to have to save your own money for college and not count on anybody else. And I guess the smart thing is to be prepared.
We get the monthly reports, and in the 3 years I've been in the program, I'm not going to retire on it, but I have quite a bit of it's been building. steadily over the past 3 years. Every time I've gotten it back, it's increased tremendously.
Where'd you get the cart?
A hostile takeover from those guys on the last green.
That's nice. Well, assuming I'm not going to steal in order to fund my retirement or my kids' college education, what, oh vaunted personal finance columnist, do you suggest?
Well, to me, the key thing is to not get intoxicated with this prosperity. You know, we've had an incredible run of 20 and 30% returns in the stock market for the past few years, and the long-term average is only 10%. And if we don't depart from the long-term average, that means we're going to have some years where we lose 10% and 20%. And so the smart person recognizes that and saves money all the time and doesn't use these periods of prosperity to spend money on bigger houses and sport utility vehicles and all of these things. Now is the time to squirrel it away and get ahead. If you don't need it in the end, you retire early, you send your kid to a more expensive college, you have more options in life.
The market itself has come so far so fast, particularly in the last 3 or 4 years. I don't think any of us would be surprised to see a lot, at least slower growth in the market over the next few years, if not an outright correction at some point in time. That's only realism, in my view anyway, simply based on the fact that by many, many measures we're at very fully valued levels today. And that's not predicting when or how bad a bear market we might have. But the fact of the matter is we haven't had a serious correction in many, many years, and that is simply without precedent.
The question now, of course, is how long can these good times continue to roll? And on the face of it, it seems as though we should be able to continue to have great prosperity for the next 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years. I mean, tell me when the next war is going to start, and that's when the next period of inflation and bad times.
I think a lot of people are out there are spending like maniacs, and these times can't continue forever. Mathematics tells you that, and market history tells you that. The person with a long-term perspective should be investing in the stock market through mutual funds if they're not very experienced, or through good individual stocks if they feel they know what they're doing. They should have a reserve in bonds that will stay solid if the stock market goes down, and they should have a cash reserve that'll keep them going for a year or 2 years in case the economy goes in the toilet. The 20-year-olds seem to have gotten the message about saving, and they seem to know that they're not going to count on big pensions from a lifetime employer to keep them going when they're old. They know that they're going to live longer than people did before. They'll have more years in retirement than people ever did before. And consequently, these younger people are saving at a much greater rate than we did or that our parents did.
But aren't you leaving something out? The important thing is to invest in yourself. If you need the skills to change, to move ahead in your own field or to keep current in your own field, you've got to spend the time and the effort to get them.
Yeah, I mean, how many people do we know, or does anybody know, who's working on the same factory floor their father did? And that's just not going to happen anymore.
Build a general skill set, because it's clear more and more that general skills, as opposed to very specific, narrow technical skills, will keep you in better standing in this economy.
The more knowledge an individual has, the different jobs that they know, they can expand on what they can do. So if they're downsized in a certain area, they can move on. And I said it's just like a utility infielder for the Phillies. If he can play 3 positions, they're going to hang on to him a little longer than somebody that can just play 1.
There is inevitably going to be a time frame when customer A doesn't want any of product B. And that product B crosses a work center that has a person running a machine. If they know how to do only that machine, I've got a problem. So we have talked to our employees, and they have responded with great gusto, said, get cross-trained, learn how to do more than one thing, so that we can move you where the work is. So your job may change, but your employment will be more secure than it would otherwise be. It seems to be working, but we haven't really gone through a significant downturn yet, and I don't want one either, but to really measure this, but I can tell you we haven't had a layoff here since 1987.
Learn what you can that could carry you someplace else. Some jobs you could transpose. You could transpose some types of work into other fields. Keep your mind open. Don't put your whole life into one thing.
It's only going to be the people who are equipped to handle constant change through education and re-education who are going to be able to make it. Last one, ready to tee 'em up?
Tell you what, why don't we take early retirement? I'll buy you one of those $4 Frappuccino numbers down at the clubhouse.
$4 for a coffee. $4 invested today at 12%, 25 years. Why don't you invest the $4, buy me a new set of clubs when we retire?
I'll tell you what, you can keep the $4 and go ahead and invest it. I'm going to buy myself a Frappuccino.
All right, well, you know, investing is really something that pays off in the long run. And my father got me started in investing when I was a kid. I did a paper on American Motors Company. He bought me a couple shares of American Motors stock.
But you know what John Maynard Keynes said, in the long run, we're all dead.
Well, my grandparents' principle was don't spend principal, and they saved it forever. And when the stock market went down, they just continued buying, and they never sold anything, and they never panicked. And they did well in their old age.
That's terrific. And where are they today?
Well, that's true.